October 7th, as we know, Simchat Torah was probably the most difficult day for the Jewish people since the Shoah. That has been said a lot. For I'd say between 6:30 and about 3 o'clock, 3 o'clock, maybe 2 o'clock that day, those 8 hours were the most dangerous for Jews anywhere in the world since the Shoah in Otef Aza. Meaning if you were a Jew living in, and not even a Jew, if you were a Jew, somebody even supporting Jews in Otef Aza, the Gaza envelope, you were living in the most dangerous place for Jews since the Shoah. Who could ever have believed that? I know from both of my sons, who are both officers in the army, they were never concerned about the Gaza border because they were told that's under control. One son is a tank commander and the other is a commander in the paratroopers. Both of them served what's called KAV. You do something called KAV, which is your border service. When they both spoke about war, which they often did, in Israeli thinking there was preparing for a war, but it was in Lebanon. And always in Israel's military thinking, the big build-up is in Hezbollah and Lebanon. And Gaza is under control because we thought it's under control. It's actually incredible that almost 50 years later to the day, almost 50 years later, Yom Kippur, Simchat Torah, 6th of October, 7th of October, almost to the day, we once again were so blinded, not by what we didn't see, but by what we saw. If this was Parshat Toldot, I would be speaking about blindness. I'll just share a brief insight, not a long one, because I want to get to Parshat Vayetze Vayishlach. In life, we're often blinded by what we don't see. We're blind. Sometimes we're blinded because of what we think we see. There is none such person who's blind who looks but doesn't see. Sometimes what blinds us is because we're so clear of what we think we see that we don't see anything else. In researching the Yom Kippur War, because in our Mizrahi magazine for Yom Kippur, I wrote about reflections of what everyone in Israel is talking about. Now it's called the Conceptia. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but after the Yom Kippur War, the National Commission was called the Agranat Commission, which was done by the head of the Supreme Court, Shimon Agranat, I think his first name was Shimon. And the findings were the very famous idea called Israeli intelligence fell prey to its conceptia, that's his wording, a concept. And I won't go into the whole concept, but the concept was, in short, there will not be a war with Jordan and with Syria and Egypt, and they had strong svoras, both American and Israeli intelligence. All that came crashing down then. And they said Israel fell prey to a certain military tfisa. The same thing happened here. Israel had all eyes in the world on the Gaza border. Our famed Shmone Matayim and all the Modi'in, which has come out now that they were not, for the last 2 years, they've been taking it easy. We don't have to work extra hours. We don't have to work weekends and nights because it's under control. We've got all the greatest technology in the world. We've got all the greatest eyes. You can't have more eyes on that border. Yet we looked, but we didn't see. And incredibly, I came across a midrash in Lekach Tov in Parshat Toldot, which says regarding Yitzchak's blindness. It says, Vatichena einav miraot. His eyes were blinded from seeing. Pshat, he didn't see physically. But Rashi brings already 2 other explanations, or 3 explanations. We see there's something about this pasuk which is more than just physical blindness. And I saw Midrash Lekach Tov Amar Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Vatichena einav miraot bera'ato shel Esav. He simply looked and could not see what Rivka saw. You look at the Midrashim, Rivka said he's a murderer. He will molest. Yitzchak, can you not see what evil there is? He said, I don't see it. Vatichena einav mirot. Is my son capable of this? Are sons of God capable of murder and torture and the most horrific things that you all know, and we'll see some of them, he couldn't see it. And when you can't see something, you don't see it. And we looked, but we didn't see, because we thought we had it under control. They can't do such things, they won't do such things, and they're not capable of it. As Jews, we don't think human beings are B'Tselem Enosh are capable of this. As Westerners, we want to believe that at the end of the day, people just want to live and let live. But we got a wake-up call that some people don't want to live and let live. They want to live in order for others to die, in order for them to die, in order for others to die. I came across an incredible midrash of Rabbi in Midrash Rabbah. It says regarding Hagar, when Avram sends her out, that she was worried about Ishmael dying, and Hashem says, "Don't worry." It says, "Vayiftach Hashem et einei." Hashem opens her eyes, and she sees that there's water. Rabbi Binyamin says, "But what, was the water there before? How come she didn't see it?" I couldn't believe it with the midrash. I'm Rabbi Binyamin. Kulam becheskat sumin. We all blind. We all blind, unless Hashem opens our eyes. And therefore, our tefillah, we are. That's, by the way, the Rabbi Meir Balanes, when you lose something that you say that's where you might know it from. So my wife's a big believer in that. I'm slowly becoming a big believer in it as well. And you say, but how come you looked everywhere and you didn't find it? I don't know. We sometimes look everywhere and it's right in front of you. You need to say a tefillah, because it's not enough to look everywhere. You need siyata d'shmaya to find what you're looking for. And sometimes what's blinding us from seeing is the fact that we see things in a certain way. And therefore all of us have a level of blindness that we need. And the tefillah is that Hashem will allow us to see the things that we should be seeing. There will be another commission here. That time will come. Now's not the time. And lots of things will come out, how the greatest military in the region and the greatest intelligence services looked but saw nothing. And there'll be time for that. So my sons never spoke about, that's under control. That's under control. So on that day, our youngest son, Daniel, he's an officer in tanks. He was stationed in Nachal Oz in the south. That was his base. We actually know the area very well, because both my son Daniel and our son Jonathan have been based there. Daniel's been based there for about 4 months, a little bit longer, in Nachal Oz. And so we know that. So he was there with his tank. As I said, he's a commander in tanks, and he's there with his tzevet. Jonathan was at home with his then fiancée, who's now his wife. He was at home with us in Yad Binyamin, which is somewhere in the middle of Israel. If you're going down south, you're going to Sderot. So you're going to go on the road Latrun, Road 3, and then just before Yad Binyamin, you're going to go into Road 6. You're going to go that way, or maybe you'll go via Beit Shemesh. I don't know, anyway. That you might pass, Yad Binyamin is a little town which sits on Road 3, which is the road from Road 1 to Ashkelon, and Road 6, which is, we came back 9 years ago from South Africa to Yad Binyamin, and one of the biggest things we noticed in Israel is the road infrastructure. It's unbelievable. What's only happened in Israel in the last 15 years, one of the biggest things is road infrastructure. When they open these tunnels in Yerushalayim, like my wife says, so you can't say Shechianu every day. Every day is Shechianu. If you come in every day from Yerushalayim and you know what it means to have a road, now there's this other new road. It's like it's unbelievable that this is what we're living through. That is just unbelievable. So Road 3 is an expanded road, and Road 6 is his last 20 years unbelievable road. So we live in Yad Binyamin. Jonathan was there with his fiancée Galia, or as she says, Galia. With us, about 8 o'clock in the morning, after lots of missed rockets and everything, he understood something was going on. His commander told him to come to Sderot. He is a Mempei, what's called a company commander in the paratroopers. His role, he's based on a base in a place called Shomria, which is a base which trains all paratroopers, new recruits. If you're a paratrooper and you're a new recruit in basic training or advanced training for your first 8 months, you will be based in a place called Shomria. It's called, if you really want to be impressive, and you saw called Bach Tzanchanim. If you say that, then you're a madrega of knowing what's going on. I'd never heard of it until he was in the army. Basis Hadrachat Tzanchanim, I think that's what it stands for. That's Actually, I don't think that's what it's saying. Anyway, what is it? Yeah, so he's trained. He is a company commander. He's about 160 soldiers. It's about 130 something regular soldiers plus the sergeants and officers. That's his company. A pluga that he is training over there. So he was off for Shabbos. He had left his M16, which he never does in the base. He said it's Simchat Torah. He doesn't like to walk around with a gun unnecessarily. It was also going to be Hakafot Shniot, which is big, and take his wife, his fiancée, then back to Sad. Her family are from Kibbutz Sad, which is a kibbutz actually very close to Nachal Oz. They were supposed to live there. People say how they're doing, where they're living. They actually don't have a place to live. They had a little home they were supposed to live in Kibbutz Sad, which has been, of course, evacuated. So her mother's up north with her father, her grandfather. Her father's part of the security team inside. She's up with her mother. He's gone back to his base. So they are the wandering Jews, along with the other 200,000 who have been evacuated from their homes. So Yonatan on that day makes his way in his car with a handgun and another handgun of his brother down to Sderot. I wasn't worried. I was just worried that he would drive quickly and have it, God forbid. I said, that's my worry. I thought, what can be possibly happening inside? He did say there was terrorists, but I remember him straight away said, yeah, can't be from Gaza. He doesn't know what it is. We saw the one mini he saw on his phone, one minivan. Yeah, so I really thought you really need to go. What, there aren't enough soldiers in the south. You, the guys training new recruits, needs to go with his handgun. What is this, I thought he's being a little bit Rambo and whatever. But I did ask him to phone his officer and say, why does he need to come? He phoned his officer and I could see his officer didn't know what was going on. And he just said, if you've got a gun, come down to Sderot, to the meet at the Magen David Adom. 4:30, from after multiple phone calls on my wife and our phone, and Shabbos he phones, he says, Dad, I'm okay. Straight away, I've been shot in the leg. I'm in Soroka Hospital in Beersheba. Don't worry, listen to my voice. You can hear me. I'm okay. I said, did it hit God forbid, the artery? He said he doesn't think so. He said he put a tourniquet on very tightly. He said he's at the hospital. He's being treated. He's fine. He said two things. He said, I've been trying to phone Daniel the whole day, and his phone's off. He hasn't responded. I did fight in Nachal Oz, where he's based, and his tank wasn't there, which is a good sign. He says, you have no idea what this base looked like. You have no idea. Every single vehicle had been hit with an RPG, dead bodies all over the place. He said, I'm very worried about her parents because they live in Kibbutz Sad. He ended up fighting in Sderot, a place called Tzomet HaKshatot, which you'll go to, Kshatot Junction, a place called Kchetz Shachor, you might get to. It's a memorial of the Tzanchanim outside Kfar Aza, on the road past Kibbutz Sad, and he eventually led a force into Nachal Oz, the base. That's where he saw that my son's tank wasn't there. He fought for about an hour 45 until he was shot, and they saved about 25 Tatzpitaniot soldiers, which were hiding in all different places. And he and the two people on either side of him were injured. The one on his left was shot in the back, the one on his right shot in the stomach. Thank God they're all okay. The jeep coming down to Nachal Oz of Maglan soldiers in front of them was shot by an RPG, and three out of the four died instantly. Their jeep had the RPG, went straight over their head. He didn't have a proper gun because he only had handguns. He had borrowed a driver's gun, which had jammed after two shots. His friend next to him, Yedidia Sror, who lives in Yerushalayim, is a mempei with him, was shot in the stomach. He's, thank God, fine. 2 weeks ago, he had his son's bris. He was critically wounded, but he's, thank God, doing well. So Yonatan took his gun and his vest and took a helmet from a soldier from Seret Matkal who had been injured. This is what we were dealing with. This is what we were dealing with in the day. So for me and my wife and our family, the fact that Yonatan is alive, relatively lightly to moderately wounded, is an unbelievable gift from Hashem. And the one thing I've learned, and I've spoken a lot about it, and I want to talk about that now, I want to talk about other things, is that you can in life have tremendous bracha and klala at the same time, and one should not affect the other one. You should not be able to not appreciate the enormous blessings we have because we've got curse. Who doesn't have curse in their life? Who doesn't? Who doesn't have challenge? Yeah, we have it on a more extreme, but the extremes teach about the klal. There's obviously Aristotle has this principle of rationality. He said, go to the extremes to crystallize issues so you can come back to the subtle and deal with it in your life. All of us have bracha and klala in our life. Show me one person who everything is fine, who their health is perfect, their spouse health is perfect, their children is perfect. Show me one person who says every one of their kids has turned out exactly how they want. You do have some families like that, which we all wish we were those families. But then those families, show me those which don't have health issues or parnosa issues or shalom bayit issues or God knows what issues. We all know the Hasidic stories of not wanting to swap our tzoros with other people. We have huge bracha that our son not only fought tremendously heroically like all the sons of and soldiers of Israel, but also that he was only lightly injured. Hashem, so to speak, sent him there and pulled him straight out. And it's a tremendous bracha. Our other son, Daniel, hasn't been as lucky, and we do hope and pray that that will change. Since that day, for the first 3 weeks, he was considered missing. One soldier was killed in the tank. There's 4 in a tank. The other 3 were missing for 3 weeks, meaning there was no evidence of any pictures, no videos. 3 weeks after, at the end of Sheva Brochas, I'll come back to the wedding in a second, we got updated that his status is taken hostage. Karov levadai, most likely taken hostage. I don't know for sure, but in all likelihood. That's been the status the last 4 weeks or so. So we had the situation for the first 3 weeks of a son injured, supposed to be married 9 days afterwards, another son missing. Once we understood the status of missing, where they don't have enough information, is going to continue for a few weeks, we decided painfully to go ahead with a wedding. My wife was the hero here. She said, listen, they're a from couple, what are they going to wait around for? Let's have a chuppah, let's have a wedding. Please God, Daniel comes out soon, we'll have a big party. We spoke to the Chatan and Kala. I've often quoted that his direct commander, a traditional guy from Tel Aviv, Ro'i Zabatani, he came and told us, he sat to visit him on the Tuesday and told us how he fought and how they fought so heroically. And that's when I understood what miracles there were. He said, Jonathan, no, you're going to get married? What's going on at the wedding? He says, Ani lo yada, I'm faked. I don't know. So I said, I'm faked, the commander, Mata Omer. He's a traditional guy from Tel Aviv. He says, Jonathan says he's a dramatic guy. He says, Jonathan, Tale al madecha, put your uniform on. Titchaten hayom ba'erev. He says, po bagina in your garden. He says, ha'aba shel charav, your dad's a rabbi, knows what to do, right? He says, taseh po chuppah, and then he says, Am Yisrael tzarich smachot. Am Yisrael tzarich smachot. He says, we have enough pain and enough process of the Jewish people to mourn and to pay. He says, Am Yisrael tzarich smachot. So that for me gave me a sense of maybe a natural visceral response. It's not crazy. It's not crazy because we're in this crazy reality. So once we knew that Daniel was going to be missing for a while, we decided with the Chatan and Kala to go ahead with the wedding. Very difficult. My son's closest friend is his brother. The first thing he said at the chuppah was that there was no eventuality that he ever saw himself being at his wedding without his brother. But we had an amazing wedding. And I'll tell you that I don't know what I was thinking. In Israel, we don't have speeches. I know in America, like in South Africa, you got to go really sleep the night before because you got to listen to every speech. It's amazing. I actually like them. You can get a lot of things done as a rabbi. It's a good. No, I really do like the speeches. You learn a lot about families. I really did enjoy it very much. But in Israel, there's no speeches. So I said, thank God, there's no speeches. I don't know what I was thinking. But in my mind, I was thinking that we're not going to talk about Daniel. The rabbi's not going to. I'm putting Daniel out of my mind for 3 hours, and that's how I'm going to cope. We canceled the wedding hall. We did something small in Yad Binyamin. The ladies of Yad Binyamin, our friends, put together in 4 or 5 days. Unbelievable. And as the rabbi starts the chuppah, he himself is a rabbi in the army. He's the rabbi of our Beit Knesset, Rabbi Merzbach. He's a tremendous guy. He just come back from the north, and he says, how can we start this chuppah without mentioning the one who's not here? And then I'm thinking, oh, God. And then he mentions him, and it was the right thing to do, obviously. He's got a lot of EQ. And we davened for Daniel, and it was very, very hard. But you know what? We wiped our faces. 2 minutes later, and we had an amazing simcha. We had an amazing, amazing simcha. Yeah, the family pictures were hard, and there were 2 or 3 moments which were hard. As a friend I've quoted her a lot, one of our friends from Yad Binyamin said, she said, this was the holiest, saddest, happiest, most inspiring wedding she'd ever been at. For me and for us, it was mainly happy. It was a happy wedding. It was really, really happy. And I learned something I've spoken a lot about since then. My first reflection was that it's possible to hold bracha and klala together. It is. If you would have told me before, I would have said it's only in mental laboratories and in the life of rational thinking is possible. Not think, it's irrational. It's possible. It's impossible to hold it together. It's not. Firstly, in psychology, there's a lot of research which shows that people are a lot more resilient than we think we are. Human beings are incredible, and we have a lot more resilience than we think we would have in those situations, number one. Number two, I realized that you can hold, the thing going through my mind at the wedding was that you can hold charada. You can have charada, fear and trembling, and you can have chedva, you can have happiness, and they can coexist. It's possible. It's possible because I know that we lived through it. And we regular, ordinary people. My wife is even stronger than I am. We're regular, ordinary people. And it is possible. It really is possible. And the first spiritual insight I had for me was what it says in Kohelet. As Rabbonim and Rebbitzins and community leaders always look into the Torah and see how it, I remember one of my uncles always saying, he was traditional at our Pesach Seders. He would always say, what, are we going to read the same Haggadah again? I mean, don't we know, do we really have to wait an hour and a half? But we all know the story, so are we going to read the same parasha again, every year the same thing? And of course, we do read the same parasha, but hopefully we've changed. And if we have changed, then remember you only see what you often, if you're changing and your perspective has changed, then you're going to see new things in the parasha because you've changed. And now you're seeing things differently. And for me, what I saw now, whenever I read chapter 3 of Kohelet, which we read before, is L'chol zman v'et tachat hashamayim. For every season and time, tachat hashamayim, there's times for everything, right? I always thought there are different times, et lamut v'et lichiot, and et lintoa v'et lakor natua, v'et livkot v'et lischok. For me, I've seen that maybe Shlomo HaMelech's wisdom is saying that the wisdom of life is to know that these seasons all happen at the same time. What I'm calling on you to do is to know at which season to reveal what. When you are in a Beit Avel, you have to take any gratitude you've got, any of your personal autobiographies, any simcha you've got, and put them down and open up all the reservoirs of empathy, of ability to share pain. And that's so we all know as Rebbitzins and community leaders that we often don't know what to say in the house of morning because it's not about us. It's not about us. We get it wrong. You've got to come in and make yourself into a kli kibul and just be able to noseh bolim chavero, just bring your heart there to share in people's pain. And it is so hard. And then we ask questions because we probe. And it's not about you. The hardest thing often is when people come and you've got to help them get over things. Just come be with me. What do you need to just be with me? Put everything else of all the good in your life, just put it down and bring out the reservoirs of thresholds of pain and to carry things with people. That's what you do in a house of mourning. At a wedding, what are we called upon to do? Show me one person who stands under the chuppah in Israel and doesn't think how they're going to pay for their next kid's wedding. Right? And you're standing there like, what did we do here? And one family which doesn't have somebody missing at the chuppah, and a family which doesn't have somewhere shlom bayit issues, and somebody's not talking to somebody, and somebody who you left out and isn't going to forgive you, and we all got 1,000,001 different things. What are we called upon to do at the wedding? Take all of that, put it in a container, forget about it, because at this season is an 8 lischok, and it's possible. It's possible. There's a lady whose daughter committed suicide. She was molested as a child in an institution. She somehow saw the wedding. She's got her son's wedding coming up, and she reached out to me and said, I saw your son's wedding, and I saw the strength that you and your wife had. I've been dreading my son's wedding, but I feel that you can help me. So we're going to talk in the coming days, and it's a very simple message. we are a lot stronger than we think we are. We should never, ever dread simchas. We just have to know how to put all the non-simchadik things in a little bottle it up, put it in its place. We gave it expression at the wedding. We gave it expression. It came out. We gave it expression. And then we put it back, the genie in its bottle, and we were able to have simcha. The human heart is an unbelievable vehicle for Hashem's blessing. I'll say something about this week's parsha. It's all these parshas. It's good for Chayei Sarah, it's good for Toldot, and it's good for Vayishlach. And it's always a good one. And then I'll leave some time for questions. We know that when Esav encounters Yaakov, and Yaakov is very fearful of the encounter, right? And he wants to give him all gifts to make up. He says to him, make up. He says to him, we know that Esav says, no, I don't need any of your gifts. Yeshli Rav, I've got so much. I don't need your gifts. And he says, and then Yaakov family says, V'chanani Elokim, God has graced me, v'chi yeshli kol. I've got everything. Chazal pick up on this in a number of places in Masechet Baba Batra, Daf Yud Zayin, where they say that they pick up something we all know from benching. Not for the benching, it wouldn't be as famous as it is. That by Avram it says Bakol, by Yitzchak it says Mikol, and by Yaakov in this week's parsha coming up it says Kol. And this, say Chazal, is an incredible blessing. And therefore, when we bless the Balabait, what do we do? Arachaman Yivrech Balabait. Bless everybody. Kemo shinit baruchu avoteinu Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov. Bakol, mikol, kol. Kein yavarech otanu kulanu yachad bivracha shleima. V'nomar, what's the shleimut of blessing? Kol. What is this kol thing? What is this kol thing? The Gemara in Masechet Baba Batra Daf Tet Zayin Amud Bet Daf Yud Zayin says, Shlosha hit iman HaKadosh Baruch Hu. 3, God gave a whiff of Olam Haba in this world. Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And where do you see that they had a whiff of Olam Haba? Bakol mikol kol. A person who walks around with the word kol is living in Olam Haba in this world. Because what is kol? Kol is a blessing of God that we are called upon to reveal that everything is okay in God's world. If you live in God's world, where Olam Hazeh is a reflection of Olam Haba, then everything's okay. In our world, nothing is okay. No, not nothing. A lot's not okay. Show me one person. At best you can do is what Esav says. If you look with a Naim, Mitachat Lashemesh of Esav, the best you can say is, a lot is going well. I often listen when people say, how are you? How are you? People say, everything okay? So everything can't be okay. Most things are okay. That's not the question. I didn't ask you if everything's okay. You really want to hear? I'll tell you how not okay so much is in life. The question is not that. The question is, how are you doing? What's your attitude to life? And if we live in the world of our Avot and Imahot, where we are blessed with this Olam Haba, Olam Hazeh, everything is okay. I feel that everything is okay. I promise you everything's not okay. And we are very, very fearful. If you are a soldier, if you are an officer, if you're a man, an officer, if you're a white man, an officer and a soldier, right? If you're a Jewish white man, officer, soldier, okay, you're not in the best shape for world sympathy to be at the front of the line. And it's not an encouraging thought as a father and as a mother. And there's nothing okay, and there's not one moment in day which is okay. But everything's okay, because we don't live in our world, we live in His world. And when you live in God's world, everything is okay, even when it's not. And all of us are called on to do that. All of us are called upon to do that. Yes, ours is a very extreme, and I'll tell you there's people who are more extreme. There are people who have multiple family members. There are people who have sick, thankfully many are coming out now, children, sick parents, multiple members. When I sit with the families, it's terrible, but you see some of the stories. And not to mention 1,200 dead of the horrific torture that many of them endured. And therefore, the blessing, that the Ramban reveals this when he says, Hashem berechet Avraham, bakol. That the Ramban there says on Parashat Chayei Sarah, he goes into bakol and he says it's a blessing from Hashem. It's a ruchani blessing, that a person feels you got everything. And I think for me, kol is milashon, kli is milashon kol. There's a beautiful word in Hebrew, one of my favorite words called lahachil, which means to, there isn't a good word for it in English, contain, to make space for everything. And I'll just end and say, and I've got so much more to say, but I'll leave you some time for questions. When you live in a world of kol, which is God's world, then you can handle anything and everything because it's all happening. It's God's world. And everything's okay in God's world, even when it's not. That is our great challenge. There's nothing heroic about me. There's nothing. What I'm saying is Hashem gives kochot. We are ordinary people who Hashem gives kochot to. I think in times of challenge, we are called out to have resilience psychologically. And I think Hashem gives us impossible nisyonot, and He gives us impossible kochot to deal with them. And I'll just end and say that for me, and this is a whole thing on its own, but I'll just say it. I want to give you some time for questions. Is that I think OUisrael in the last 5 years, in the last year, couldn't find space for everyone. We were all blinded by what we saw. Everybody was right and self-righteousness. And in any forum I was involved in to bring people together, I was very, very fearful because for the first time this last year I saw moderates becoming extremists. I don't expect extremists not to be extremists, but when moderates you can't talk to. And that's at Mizrahi, one of the roles we're trying to fulfill. Mizrahi was always founded as something of the Zionist movement and Torah. And, I say if you view the world through one eye, you lack depth. Everyone views the world with one eye. And we said, you do see it clearly, but you don't have depth. Then you all of a sudden, but how can you see with two eyes? No, we can. How can you see two things that you can? Look with both eyes, and all of a sudden you get depth. If only life was so simple. Rav Tzvi Cook used to say, it says about the gula, ki ayin ba'ayin yiru. He says, our eye, first you need two eyes. And when you have two eyes, you can see it the way Hashem sees it. Life is complicated. And we don't always see it that way. We get so stuck in our own views, which are true. But we don't find room for other views. And yes, we can't agree with everything. And yes, there's lots of machlokot. But if we understand that when you see things with depth, both have got a place. That's the salient teaching I learned from Rav Kook. There is a book here that I managed to write on. It's called The Jewish State from Opposition to Opportunity. We just reprinted them. They only came out in this Yom HaAtzmaut, but there are copies. One of our donors, we reprinted some, and they are here for we're giving them to the solidarity groups. It's basically a Torah view on the state of Israel from our point of view, on trying to understand why anti-Semitism has become anti-Zionism. It's based on the Vilna Gaon in Habakkuk. It's all laid out in the first 6 chapters of the book. And the second part is based on 3 or 4 ideas of Rav Kook, which I've called A Vision for Unity in Israel and Why the World Needs It, what a purpose of a Jewish state is and how it should be bringing all the dichotomous force of the Jewish people together. We have to find place, lahachil, because when you find place for kol, you're living in God's world. One of the biggest things I got from Rav Kook was this ability to be so encompassing. And when you can encompass, you're living in God's world. Because God is kol yachol. And God is Hayahu Veviyeh. And if we can bring into our lives a whiff of that, we're not God. We have to have human judgment. And we have to have discernment. But we dare not be limited to the extent of our discernment that we don't have space. And the Jewish people had no space for anyone. And everybody was disqualified. And I think with all the horrific pain on that day for so many people, for Klal Yisrael, the shock, and for our family, of course, is that Hashem has brought us back together. And that is our great challenge now, is to do everything to preserve that call. Because if we aren't going to do it, no one's going to do it for us. And Hashem, with all the terrible anti-Semitism, it's basically, in my humble opinion, it's, guys, first and foremost, you've got each other. And if you can stand together as a people and find place within the Jewish people, all of the Jewish people, which is Rav Kook writes about so much, then so much else will fit into place. It's got to start with that. Everything begins at home. We all know if you can find home in your marriage for both of you, which is difficult. If you can find, I'll say it's the most complex human relationship is because your spouse, they just don't go away. You know what I mean? Your kids, at some point, they leave. Just get out the house. Your grandchildren, they come for a day. Okay, guys, it's nice to have you go. But when they just don't go, there you have to really dig deep to find within yourself the ability to have place for somebody else. They're in your Daled Amot. And if you find place in that holy relationship, and then with family for the different kids, which don't often fulfill the things you want them to, and then in the broader family, and then in the Jewish people, you can't make peace outside if you can't make peace inside. Everything in Judaism is from the inside out, from the inside starting with ourselves, giving yourself space, giving everyone else, and that is kol, and that is yeshli kol, and that is why I believe Chazal emphasized bakol mikol kol. That's the great bracha, and please God, we'll be able to carry this sense of Jewish unity and finding space for each other going forward. We need it far beyond just, please God, bringing back all of the hostages, uprooting Hamas regime from our borders, and continuing to hopefully operate differently from how we've operated until now. We'll leave these books for you. You're welcome to take one. Please feel free to ask. You can ask any question. There's no such thing as a bad question. And if you ask a bad question, I'll just ask you to leave. No, I'm just joking. I've never yet had a question which is inappropriate. So Rabbi wants to take you, but I'm going to use speaker's privilege and give you a chance for 2 or 3 questions. My watch is 5 minutes slow, Rabbi. Sorry, no, I'm joking. Yeah.
I'm Sarah Robinson from New York.
Are you Rav Shaul's? Is Rav Shaul your husband?
Related by marriage.
Yes, yeah.
Look how we make space for each other.
Yeah.
I'm just overwhelmed with wanting to say thank you. Toda al Hakol. Thank you for your personal story, which is heartrending. We're thinking about you. We all had a conversation about how to position ourselves so we have space, and I'll be thinking about you and praying and to have that encompassed by a worldview which is so hopeful, and I think that gives us such, speak for myself, such koach to lahamshich. And I don't think it's something you can answer, but the idea of looking and not seeing, and hearing and not listening. I think there's a really big theme, like the young women who are at the border and speaking and seeing what it's just, there's such a lot of pain, and I'm sure anger is one of the emotions that is going on. In terms of leadership going forward, do you see people emerging who will be able to kind of lead the people in the way that you're saying?
Look, I hope and pray that after this, everything will change in Israel. There's been far too much, and it's not about one side. I think Israeli politics has become, there's a chapter on it in the book, called Machiavellian politics versus Davidian politics. The father of political science is Machiavelli, and his number one principle is destroy your enemy. If you can't kill them, then destroy their reputation. And the downside, as Churchill said about democracy, it's the worst system. There's just the best of all the others, but it's terrible. It nurtures leaders who lie to get elected. And it also, in democratic elections, all you do is undermine your opponent. And when you have it once every 4 or 5 years, shoin. Do you know Yiddish? Shoin. If you have it, I'm from Morocco, and I'm not from Morocco. My father's Moroccan born, but I grew up in South Africa. My grandparents from my mother's side are from Kovna. So my Yiddish is better than my Moroccan Arabic. But Mela. But what was I saying? Politics. Yeah. I want to say it like this. If you have it every 4 or 5 years, Mela, when you have it every 4 or 5 months, then all you've had in Israel is non-stop delegitimizing and demonizing, because that's what all the PR companies tell you to do. Find the one weakness of your opponent, make a story, and just portray them as not trusted. Just destroy their character. And that was all a light warm-up for the last year. That was just like that was the curtain raiser. I don't know what you call it in America. It's the game before the Super Bowl. That's the I don't know what the American term for this, but that's the pre-game. That's nothing. You ain't seen nothing yet, no? And boy, oh boy, did we see something over the last year. And I hope and pray that what will happen is leadership with a lot more hachala, not to give up on what's important to us, but humility. No one has the answers. As Yosef says, Lashem Pitronim. Lashem Pitronim. We don't know. And we're all convinced we know, but we've seen that Hamas doesn't really care who thinks they know. And I'm hoping what won't come out of this is all the finger pointing. I've written, and I believe Israel's one of its biggest tests is going to be, and I'll end with this, Rabbi. I know you've got to go. I will end with this. One of Israel's biggest tests is going to be the national inquiry, which has to be free of all political agendas. It's got to be, otherwise no one's going to believe, because right now everyone in Israel can write it and tell you who's to blame. Everybody already, If this is part of perpetuating Israel's machlokot, as opposed to being part of Israel's healing, then, and I think for me the healing begins with, number one, a principle that we've forgotten: we're all in this together. It doesn't actually matter. Like in marriage, does it really matter who's right at the end of the day? Every good husband and wife that I can only talk about husband knows that it doesn't matter who's right. It only matters in competition who's right. If you're in a competitive relationship, you've got to be right. The Jewish people cannot be in competition with each other. We're in competition with our enemies and have been beating us, and we dare not be all, if we now with Hamas, all this nice, that's not with your enemies who want to kill you. That's a competitive relationship. You've got to win. But in relationships which are not about competition, but about connection, in those type of relationships, it's never about the upper hand. And politics, Davidian politics, is not Machiavellian, the upper hand, because King David, if you look at the book of Shmuel, says that politics is not about power, which is always about competition. It's about unity. Jewish leadership, says Rav Soloveitchik in Parashat Shoftim, is about, and I quoted in the books, about unity. That's why the king does Hakol. And if you read very carefully the whole book of Shmuel, King David's book, you'll see he forgives every one of his political enemies. Everyone who he should have taken issue with, who had every halachic reason to, Shaul, Ishboshet, Avner ben Ner, Amasa ben Yeter, Avshalom, he forgives them, because for not his enemies. An enemy wants to kill you, you've got to fight the battle, you've got to win. But in the Jewish people, our ideological enemies are not our enemies. Yes, there are super extremes, always have the extremes. We can't tolerate the worst of extremes, but the vast, vast majority, what did King David manage to do is to bring them all together. And therefore, he was the unifier of Israel. He was the one who brought Shiftayah together. And he was so incredible that the Mashiach, the future leader of Israel, has to be King David. And that is what we need. I'm hoping and praying, Bezrat Hashem, that this horrific day will usher in, unfortunately through terrible pain, a new era of hitnalut tziburit, of that the number one thing before anything is we're in this together. We don't all know the answers as much as we believe in them, and let's create space for not giving up on what we believe in. It needs a lot of humility. Unfortunately, in relationships, it takes two to tango, and if you come in with this view and the other doesn't, then you get taken advantage of. And King David's B'nai Tzruya, his advisors always said, they're taking advantage of you. You naive. And the challenge is, it does require naivete, but it also in politics requires wisdom. And it's hard, because if one takes two to tango, and if one tangos and the other one doesn't, then you're in trouble. But hopefully, we're all in this together. Hopefully, we can be able to tango in it together. And we need a tremendous tefillot for that. And I don't know, God forbid, I don't think we need to go through more than what we went through. And Bezrat Hashem, we'll have the Siyata Shmaya to do that. If I can ask you, please, to daven for Daniel Shimon ben Sharon. I am, in our community in South Africa, made this for all of the kids. So they send all the kids in South Africa walk around with this. I've left some in the box for you. Under no obligation to do anything. They just sent them to us. It just says, bring them home. And Daniel Shimon ben Sharon. And we also have a concern that he might have been injured in the tank. There was blood in the tank. So we'll know that in the coming day. I've always felt that as the officer, it's very hard to overrun a tank and take people out without there being some injury. So we do have a concern about that as well. So to also daven for Rufat Nefesh, Rufat Guf, as well as his return. And Bezrat Hashem, next time, Mesibat Hodaya, here with Yonatan, all together, and with Daniel, with Yonatan and Daniel together, along with all the other hostages. Thank you very much, and thank you. Shkoyach.